私はウタ先輩がなんか余計なことをするんじゃないかってひどっ
Well, I see Kokoro learned one of the most important skills of the idol.
We open this week with Uta waking up to the sounds of a cat on its deathbed. Well, okay, it wasn't anything that morbid, just Purin being suffocated from being wrapped in Miron's hair ears.
絡まったじゃないメロ絡めたのメロコロン
Oh, so you took lessons from the Yukako Yamagishi school of yandering. Nice to see that you appreciate the OG.
Like, I'm not even really kidding. She was using her hair because she wanted to prevent Purin from instinctively going to sleep with Uta in the middle of the night, which she still ended up doing in the early morning.
メロさくら歌このネータマ泥棒
I'm sorry, what did you just say? Can we see that with the subs?
さくら歌このネータマ泥棒
Oh, okay, I just thought that she said something that would be entirely appropriate for a kid's show, even though that's totally what that is.
But yeah, in order to stake her claim on her NeeTama, she insisted that they go out on a date. And sure enough, they weren't even being subtle about her intentions, but as we'd seen throughout this episode, Purin's brain was about as dense as a neutron star. However, it didn't stop the Precure from becoming a bunch of shippers, in particular their resident Blue.
ブリルに構ってほしくて一生懸命なところとかすっごく可愛い
Be careful, Nana. You're going down the same path as one of your immediate predecessors, and really like her, you should probably focus more on your own game.
That aside, we did get an intriguing little bit where at first it seemed like Marilyn was trailing off into one of her usual poems, as though she were like Noelle Vermilion, but like Noelle, we'd soon find out there was a little more meaning to this stuff. However, before we got there, we still needed more pickup attempts from this character who in any other show would be the worst kind of harem protag.
ジーメロジーメロジー
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
Anyway, after seeing my nightmare fuel for the next few weeks, Uta ended up further upsetting Meron by revealing that she and Purin had slept together every day until she had arrived. Fortunately, this also ended up giving them time to regroup and figure out what this Yandere fairy's deal was, and they'd even get help from the queen and her ringtone that still cracks me up. But yeah, she exposited about how Meron was a special fairy, as even opening the portal to the human world was entirely through her own power. Moreover, her aforementioned poems were more like prophecies.
光と闇は溶け合わない
Wow, thank you for shutting down one of the best ships ever.
But yeah, kind of basic foreshadowing for something that would usually happen around this time of the year, when they want to release a few more toys that might end up adding a few more colors to this team. And apparently, to add those colors, Meron first needed to awaken her Kiakira, which apparently she was lacking, and it was strongly hinted that Purin would awaken them.
Kinda feels like she already did that when she cheered for the Precure back in the basketball episode, but again, let's just forget that even exists.
Anyway, considering that Purin was the key to unlocking Meron's true potential, and said key was a little misshapen, the Precure were going to have to try even harder to force this ship. Thus, they started with the basics, with pair looks, but because they only had their own merch, they ended up looking more like Uta's groupies. However, Meron, in a nice character moment, agreed to compromise and even let Uta do up her hair. She also let Nana pick out their date spot.
恋人や友達同士で一番大切なものを教え合ってこのハートのロック
I will give the show this, at least this lock and key stuff isn't between a pairing with more than a slight age gap, and it can't be as suggestive if it's between a girl and a girl. But on that note, we checked in on the villains, or more specifically, Cuddy.
何持ってんだもんこいつはカッティ
おっきなお友達も元気かな
But yeah, the only other thing in this episode that was as blatant as the fairy shipping was Cuddy's inevitable face turn, which, I'm not gonna lie, I'm just hoping that we can wrap it up quick and move on to the next storyline. I mean, I won't say this stuff is totally bringing down the villains of the show, but it is leaving them in an awkward position where it kind of feels like we're stretching out this plot point with Cuddy.
推しなんですぞ推し
We've already used up all of our jokes for that.
Back with the fairies, their date was going about as well as it could, in that Prune was still treating Meron like her side bitch. However, we also got a flashback revealing how Prune became Meron's NeeTama in the first place, when she did nobly protect her during Darkine's conquest of their kingdom. Man, it did legit make me feel for these two, and highlight the better parts of Prune, you know, when she's not illegally uploading stuff. It also kind of explained why Meron was so clingy to her thanks to the power of the suspension bridge effect, where an increase in adrenaline and fear can make someone far more susceptible to romantic feelings. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do think her love for Purine was genuine, but the clinginess was a little bit of a different story.
Now, if you want to see a coupling that looks as phony as all hell,
これでずっと一緒です。
ああ、とわに。
リア充爆発しろ。
And it did at least give Cuddy a very legitimate reason to want to go back to the side of evil. Also, yeah, if this episode feels like one of the most satirical episodes since the first one, well, there is a good reason for that, but we'll get more into that during the closing thoughts. Anyway, after unfortunately not making them explode, he created a monster of the week for our heroines to fight.
why did his voice get higher when he fired off the key from his, you know what, don't answer that question, please.
But yeah, pretty decent fight this week. I mean, there was really only one notable moment of Sakuga where the Precure used an impressive combo of Nana's barrier and Kokoro throwing Uta. But it also had this admittedly really entertaining bit where, out of jealousy, Cuddy tried to cut the Cures off from their fairy cheer squad. And while the Cures probably could have just broken that chest open, they still tried to get the key from Cuddy, who of course put up a fight.
Hey, this so.
あれありがとう。
好きだ。
Oh yeah, and I guess they had a monster to defeat, who just kind of casually strolled in for his inevitable defeat.
プリキュアハイエモーション。
And of course, they got another ribbon for their troubles.
ファンになっちゃうプリ？
This season has way too many fairy butts in it.
Still, excessive twerking aside, it was clear to see why Meron genuinely liked Prune, and in easily one of the most direct bits of Yuri in this entire franchise, she actually gave her a little kiss on the cheek, which, yeah, I'm not even sure if we saw Akira and Yukari do it on screen.
Then again, they are just fairies, so I guess they can get away with it. I mean, just imagine if they were like full-sized humans.
Later, as hinted at during the battle, Meron possessed her version of the Humpty Dumpty lock and key called the Heart Kyari lock. Now obviously, this was going to be our new mid-season toy of the season, as well as a means of further world building, like the Heart Tree, that had connected this specific town to Kiakia Land. However, that interesting world building would have to be saved for another day, as the episode ended with Prune pulling a Nokotan impersonation to get to her personal Koshtan, much to Uncle's annoyance. Yeah, I'm still gonna make these references even if they're not really sisters.
Yeah, it still sounds like she's saying the other thing. But still, this is a really fun episode.
Obviously, this probably had some of the most Yuri in this whole series, which was definitely cute, but I'm a little more here for the comedy myself.
And this is definitely more my style of comedy, because I just like it when this franchise gets a little more satirical.
This week saw the return of Unico, the unicorn Ayana, who I guess after watching a few episodes of nothing but hetero shipping said nuts to that and decided to bring in all of the Yuri for the fairies of the season. And this was effective, both in terms of the aesthetics for those who like Yuri ships, even if they're a little bit more on the furry side this week, and actual plot development. Yeah, it's clear that the next big arc of the series is going to revolve around Meron and her little lock. Thus, it is important that they develop her and her partner in Prune, which, yeah, you can take in any way you want. And they did hint at some interesting developments for later that'll likely further connect this town to Kiakia Land. Moreover, just this episode in general did feel more like Ayana's other work, Flip Flappers, not exactly in terms of the magical girling and the battles, though those were quite solid this week too, but more in the comical Yuri, with Meron being entertainingly and not annoyingly clingy to Prune. Yeah, sometimes there is a fine line between the two, especially when your character is this clingy, but Marilyn does pull back enough to allow for some wholesome moments with the Precure too. And of course, the other bits, like Cuddy going full Normies Explode mode, was just amazing to see in Precure of all things. And yeah, while I do want to move on from these villains, I will admit, this can act as a hilarious send-off to this character, who hopefully should be leaving soon. For now though, this is just a really good episode, with plenty of comedy, decent enough action, and of course loads of fairy Yuri, though hopefully they'll move on from just being another furry pairing in this franchise.
Thanks for watching, and if you want a little more Yuri in your reviews, well, we actually have a lot of that on this channel.
I mean, aside from Maho Akko, which yeah, might be a little spicy for some, we also do have VTuber Legend, and we might cover a few more shows come the summer season.
Look forward to it and Princessian tomorrow. And until then, though, for now, my friends, and if you'll excuse me, I'm just gonna go pay a visit to my local hardware store to get some materials to make a gift for a couple next door.